So, on to today's webinar, using reviews to enhance your acquisitions process. For those of you on the call that don't know me, my name is David Renfree, and I'm a Senior Customer Success Consultant here at Technology from Sage. We've actually allocated 90 minutes for today's session, which we may or may not fill, depending on how many questions we get. I am presenting solo today, so may not be able to immediately answer any questions you have, but do drop any queries you have into the chat while the presentation's happening, and I will look to pause at a couple of occasions and look to address them, and there will also be time for questions at the end. I know there are also a couple of other Technology from Sage colleagues who have registered today, so they'll be able to collect any feedback that you've got as we go. So why are we looking at reviews today? Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, we've had many registrations for today's webinar, so there's clearly a lot of interest in this. We periodically offer webinars on different parts of Talis Aspire. For those of you who are not particularly familiar with using reviews, it's very much a part of the system which is designed with librarians in mind. So when we talk about Talis Aspire, we often say it's a whole university system for students, for teaching staff, and for academics. Reviews is very much focused on the library side of things. And basically what it's there to do is it's designed to leverage the data you've got within your Talis Aspire reading lists to ensure that your library is adequately resourced for all the teaching materials that your students are going to need access to. And that might be a print book, it might be an article, it might just be checking that a web link is working. So a fresh look at reviews right now is really timely for two reasons. The first one is that we know we're entering a period of the year where many of you will be getting lists sent for review by your academics with a view for ordering resources for the upcoming 24-25 academic year. And we would expect that process to continue over the next 2 or 3 months. The second reason is that, as many of you will know, if you've been following our service announcements or our newsletters, that reviews is a part of Talis Aspire which we've really focused on developing in recent months, and there's been a whole variety of new features to aid your workflows. And those features were based on feedback that many of you gave to our product team in a series of discovery calls last year. So we hope you like them, and we will take care to point them out as we go through today's demo. Today's session isn't just about the new features though. As I've said already, we have a lot of people joining today. Some of you will already be very experienced reviews users. Other people on the call will be very new to what it can do. So what I'm looking to do is walk you through the entire process from the point when an academic completes a list and requests a review, right up to the point where a librarian completes the review and closes the loop by letting the requester know. We will also look at some of the configuration options available. So again, we have this range of people joining today. Some of you will be from universities where you have a team of acquisition staff who actually spend a lot of their time carrying out reviews. Others of you will come from smaller institutions where there's a couple of staff members who are balancing what they do in Talis Aspire with any number of other tasks within the library. Reviews is designed to be flexible, to offer you options that allow you to build a workflow that's as simple or as complex as you need it to be. So again, as we go through the demo, we'll look to highlight the choices you can make. So hopefully that introduction was all clear, what we're covering today, why it's timely and important. You might be relieved to know there isn't really a large slide deck today. It's all going to be done just from within the interface. So as I say, drop questions into the chat as you go. Tell us things that you like, tell us things that you don't like about the new features. We will review it all after the session. And yeah, without further ado, I will end the slideshow. And we will move on to reviews. So, as I said a moment ago, we really want to look at the whole process here, from the moment a review is requested by an academic, right up until the point when the review is completed. So what I've got on screen here is a typical example of a reading list, which I've deliberately created because I hope it's going to allow me to showcase all of the features I would like to cover today. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Talis Aspire lists by now, so you'll understand what we've got here. We've got a title at the top. We've got the time period that the list sits in. We can see which hierarchy node it's linked to. We can see how many students will need access to this. And then if we scroll down the list, we can see the various sections. We can see the different resources that are available on this list, and we can expand them for more details. So before we get to the library side of things, just put your academic hat on for a moment. If you can imagine that I'm an academic who is building this reading list for my students for the upcoming term. Perhaps I've nearly finished. If I just pop down towards the bottom of the list here, maybe I've got one more additional thing that I would like to add to this list before I send it for review, before it's complete. So I'm just going to click on Add Resource. I am going to choose a web page that I bookmarked recently because I think that's going to be useful for this list. I'm going to add it there now. So my list is complete. And if I go back to the top, you can see there's a publish button here reminding me that I need to make my changes live so that students can see them. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to click on publish, and that will set my changes live. At this point, I don't want to do anything else with this list. All the resources I want are on there. All of the notes that I want are on there. So as far as I'm concerned, this is complete and it's ready for my students to access. However, I probably do want the library to look over this list to check, that we have sufficient stock of all the books on the list, whether that's additional print copies or whether that's an ebook, but perhaps we don't have one at the moment. I might have added articles that we don't actually have access to at the moment that they need to order via interlibrary loan or via a scan request or whatever. So at this point, the list needs to be reviewed. There are different workflow options within Talis Aspire as to how and when a review is generated. I can't show you them all from this one list because there are 4 different workflow options and you can only have one of them live at any time. What I'm going to do with this setup, I'm going to click on the edit menu at the top and I'm going to request a review. And that is my way of telling the library that this list is now complete and I would like them to do a quality check on it to make sure that we're sufficiently resourced and that the links are working. As I say, there are different ways that can be triggered. The first 2 are request and review, sorry, publish and review, or publish and review with reminder, which is what I'm using here. And what that means is when I've got unpublished changes at the top here, there's a bar at the top giving me the option either to publish the list or to request a review for the list. So basically, you're giving the academic control. Do they just want to publish the list as is, or do they also want to request a review? And I can also request a review now from this edit menu and selecting that there. So at this point, it's going to give me a reminder, is this plugged into the hierarchy correctly? Are the student numbers correct? These are the things that you can see up here. In this case, because I've created this myself, I'm happy that what we've got there. So I'm going to request a review, click on send, and that is going to alert the library that there is a list here that needs attention. There are 2 other workflows, which I haven't mentioned yet. There is a workflow you can switch on for your setup, which is called force review. And what that does is that when an academic has hit their publish button to set the changes live, to make it available to students, that will generate a review for the list, whether they have asked for it or not. There are advantages to that approach in that you can be sure as a library that any changes that a lecturer makes to their list and puts in front of their students, you're going to be alerted to them because the library is going to receive a review. The drawback to that, of course, is that every time a list is published, you're going to get a review. And that is not necessarily a good thing if all the academic has done is perhaps added a single web link to the list and republished it. Do you really need to check that link? So there are pros and cons for these different approaches. Force review will give you much more oversight over what is actually being added to lists by your academics, but it's also going to generate more work for you in that there are more reviews in the back end of the system that need looking after. Depending on your setup, how many people you have available to do reviews, you may be more comfortable with one approach, you may be more comfortable with the other. If you've got it set to publish and review or publish and review with reminders, we've seen how you can request a review from there, and you'll see that it's now grayed out and I can't request another review. You're giving the academic more freedom to set their changes live, but you might have concerns that you are missing updates that they are putting in front of students and that you haven't seen. So there's sort of an argument to be had here. You know, are you comfortable with giving your lecturers more freedom to make changes to lists, or do you want that control, which is going to generate more work for you as a library? There are support articles which talk about these in more detail on the support site. The final workflow option we have, and to my knowledge, we've only got 2 universities using this, is that you don't actually allow the academic to publish a list at all. All that they can do, when they have finished making their changes to the list, they can click on Request Review. As you've probably guessed, that generates a review within the reviews area of Talis Aspire. The list will not go live until the library has completed the review and clicked on publish. So that really gives you ultimate control from the library's point of view, in that no changes that an academic makes will be visible to a student until you, the library, have okayed them. The drawback, of course, is that, again, it puts the onus on you, the library, to turn those reviews around quickly to make them available in time for the students so that they can see whatever it is they need to access. So you do have different options at this point about how a review is generated and how much work it's going to generate for you in the library. As I say, I'm not here to recommend which approach you should be using. It's whichever one feels most comfortable for you with the library staff you have access to carry out the reviews. Whichever one you've chosen, you're going to end up with a review. So in this case, you can see the list is now showing a review has been requested, and that has gone through to the reviews area of Talis Aspire. I could click on that, and I'm only seeing that because I'm a system admin. Your academics are not going to have access to this part of the system. I'm not going to follow there. I'm actually going to go into the reviews area as a whole because I'd like to show you the homepage and exactly what's there. So we can forget academics now. What we're going to cover at this point is what the librarians need to do once that list has come through for review. I think there was a question from someone. If you could drop that into the chat, I will happily pause at this point before we actually start to look at the reviews area. Okay, I'm monitoring the chat. There's nothing coming in at the moment, so I will carry on, but I will keep one eye on that as we go. So what we've done now is we've clicked on reviews. We have entered the reviews area of Talis Aspire. As I say, forget the academics now. This is very much a librarian part of the system. It's controlled, access to it is controlled by permission. So I wouldn't expect your students or your teaching staff ever to see this part of the system unless it's something you particularly wanted to showcase to them. So what we've got in here, these are all the lists where a review has been requested within Talis Aspire. And because this is one of our demo tenancies, you can see all the names here of myself and colleagues who have been generating things in here over the last few weeks. So what have we got on this screen? We have the titles of all of the lists that have been sent for review. We have the time period in which they sit, and that is one of the new features that I mentioned at the start of the webinar. It was suggested to us by a number of users that it would be useful for libraries when they're prioritizing reviews that are coming through to see which time period a list sits in. So this is a new column. We have what we call the stage that the review is up to. I'll talk about stages in a bit more detail in a couple of minutes, but essentially it's a useful indicator for you to get a sense of how much of this has already been done. We have the status of the review. So in the case of this one that I requested a moment ago, it's currently showing as requested. No work has been carried out on it yet. You can see that there are also completed reviews in here. So these reviews have been started and done, and there's no more work to be done on them now. We have over here an assigned column, so it is possible to assign a review to an individual member of staff, and I'll show you how that's done in a moment. Most of these haven't been assigned to anyone in particular, but you can see there is one down here, which was assigned to myself a couple of weeks ago. We can see who requested the review. We can see when they requested it, so a time and a date stamp. We can see how many items appear on the individual list that's been sent for review. So this one that I was looking at a moment ago has 24 items. There's a longer one here which has 50. There's a shorter one which has just 3. So you're going to get a sense immediately of, how long is this list? How much work is this likely to involve? And then we have an alerts column. Again, I will talk about alerts in more detail in a couple of moments once we actually go into a review and start some work. But you'll see 2 things over here. You'll either see new, and if it says new, what that means is this list has never been reviewed before. So basically everything on it for the purposes of reviewing is new because you haven't reviewed it in the context of that particular list. Or you might see a number there. So in our case, there are 24 items on the list that I've sent for review. There are alerts against 16 of those items. So an alert is something, it's Talis Aspire basically saying there is an item on this list where we think you need to pay attention, whether that's because student numbers have changed or there's a newer addition or any number of other things. And again, I will talk about alerts in a moment, but essentially we're trying to give you a sense of how many items here need particular attention. So this is your reviews homepage. And as you can probably imagine, over time, particularly if you're using reviews heavily, you get an awful lot of reviews coming into here that you need to sort of work your way through. So there are various filters at the top here. So for instance, I mentioned stages and how, there are different stages for alerts. You can filter. So, okay, which of these reviews that are currently in here, how many are currently in the check existing stock stage? How many are currently in the review metadata stage? And so on. You can filter on statuses. So of the reviews in here, how many have been requested, i.e. we haven't done anything about them yet. And you can see there's a number which are currently in the requested state. How many have been started, so they're underway, but we haven't actually completed them yet. So again, you can get a very sort of quick glance, well, where are we at with these reviews? How is our progress for the next academic year? You could filter on who it's assigned to. So I could filter on show me all the reviews that have been assigned to myself. And you can see that there are quite a few here. A use case for that might be you've got a member of staff who is part of your acquisitions team. They're off sick or they're on leave for a couple of weeks and somebody needs to pick up their work. So you could very easily come into here. Okay, which reviews have been assigned to that person? Those are the ones that we need to pick up. You can filter on alerts. So of the reviews currently in the system, how many are new reviews? How many are lists that have never been reviewed before? Perhaps it's a busy time of year. Those are the ones I want to focus on specifically. There's a new filter here for time periods. So because we've added the time periods into this screen, we're also allowing you to filter on them. I will say at this point, before anyone drops something into the chat, some of the institutions who have been with us for a number of years have pointed out that this filter is quite lengthy and that they're not really likely to want to be looking to review lists from say 2014-15. So what I will say about that is that that has already been fed back to the product team and we are discussing whether we need to tweak this filter slightly. So we're not proposing to remove it, but perhaps we're going to make it a bit more user friendly, whether that's hiding older time periods or making sure that the most recent ones are at the top. So yeah, watch this space. And you do also have the ability to search for a list. So if you have hundreds of reviews in this area and there's one you're particularly looking for, you can put in some search terms and it will quickly, sort of allow you to drill down for whichever review it is you're looking for. So you do have various options at the top of the reviews homepage to quickly get to the reviews that you're particularly interested in. You can also take action at this stage. So if there's a couple of reviews here which I can see are completed, there is an archive review button up here. And by archiving the review, you're basically removing them from this screen they're no longer going to appear in here. And so if I just refresh this screen now, you'll see that they've disappeared. But if you did want to see all of your archived reviews, you can do that by looking at the status filter at the top here. So we're giving you lots of tools to actually manage the reviews that are sitting within your system. One other thing I will show you before I move into a review itself, one of the new features that we've recently released, we'd had feedback that a lot of you like to filter this screen. So maybe you want to show all of the reviews that have been started, that have been assigned to a particular individual. And the feedback we had was that sometimes you might want to go into one of those reviews, and that if you then wanted to go back to the reviews homepage, it was really annoying that all the filters reset themselves. So one of the new releases we've done is we've ensured that those filters will actually persist if you need to go into a different screen to check something and then come back to here. So that is one of the new enhancements that we've released over the last few weeks. Again, I'll pause for questions quickly before we actually go into a review. So I'll monitor the chat for a few seconds. If anyone has something they want to add, then do drop it in there now, whether it's a question or just feedback. Hazel says, I'd noticed that about the filters persisting when you come back. This is great, saving me so much time. Thank you, Hazel. Good to hear. Yep, more feedback on the filters. People seem to like that. There's a question, is that happening in TADC, so copyright clearance as well? Honestly, Evelyn, you've caught me on the hop. Off the top of my head, I can't honestly remember, but I will find out and we'll update you afterwards. No worries. Okay, so this is your reviews homepage. The next thing we want to actually do is go into one of these reviews and take some action about it. There's a question from Peter before I do that. When using forced review, does the request show the person who published the list or the list owner? It will show you, Peter, yeah, in the requested over here. If the academic has published the review, so it's published the list, and that has forced the review because that's the setting that you've got, then the academic's name will appear up there in the requested column. Okay, so we will move on to actually looking at one of these reviews and seeing how we can feed this into your acquisitions workflow. So this is the one that I requested a moment ago, getting ready for higher education. Incidentally, if you have requested a list review, if you immediately come into the screen and check it, you may see that it's processing for 30 seconds or so. In this case, it's already processed because I've been talking you through all the different features here, but it's generally about 30 seconds from publishing to actually appearing in this area and being available to edit. So what we're going to do, we are going to go into the review itself. There's a lot of information on this screen, so let's try and break it down stage by stage. So, as I said at the beginning, reviews is essentially a tool which is designed to help you make informed purchasing decisions about items that appear on your reading lists in Talis Aspire. We've got a split screen here. The left-hand side of the screen is information about the list that you are looking at and all of the different items on the list. Let me just click show more a moment there. So we can see this is indeed the list that I was working on a moment ago. We can see that it's currently marked as requested, so no action has been taken yet. If I now fix that, I can click on start review and it's now marked as started. So, the review is underway. We can start taking actions against things on the screen here right now. Outcomes we will come back to. We mentioned stages earlier. It is possible for you within your institution to set up a number of stages that a review needs to go through. So if I just click on the stages icon here, these are the ones that we've set up in our demo tenancy. You may have different ones in your own, but they can be updated and configured at any time. The thinking behind stages is that depending on how simple or complex your review's workflow is, you may have different people working on different tasks at different points within the review. So these are example ones we've set up. It may be that it is somebody's job just to come in here and check the metadata of items on the list. It may be that then someone else has a job to check the existing stock. So, look at all the print books on the list. Are we happy that we have sufficient copies? It may be someone else's job to review digitization requirements. Of all the items on this list, maybe some of them we've had a request for an ebook which isn't available. Could we scan it instead? So, you might assign that task to someone else. It might be someone else's job to go away and source some ebook prices. It may be someone else's job to place orders. As I say, these are entirely configurable. You can make them as complex or as simple as you like, but they are there to help you build a workflow that is going to work for your institution. So there are some institutions we work with that have 7 or 8 different stages. There are some institutions we work with that do not use stages at all. And again, it's not for me to tell you how many stages you should have and what they should be. But ideally, we would advise you to have a look at reviews, get a sense of what it can do, work out what might work for you with the staff you have available, the resourcing you have available. In this case, as I say, I'm just going to leave it to review metadata. It doesn't really matter what I set it to at this point. You can also assign a review to an individual user. So at this point, I might want to assign the review to myself, or I could assign it to any of my colleagues that have the library acquisitions role and have access to this part of the system. In this case, I'm just going to assign it to myself. And so again, that would appear in the reviews homepage. It would signal that this person is working on the review right now. You do not have to work through all the stages in order. It's entirely up to you, but they are intended to be there as guidelines. And there's nothing stopping one person from doing all the work. Or as I say, it may be that you assign it to different people at different stages. But what we're trying to give you there is flexibility and visibility on who is doing what and where the review is currently up to. You can also, if you want, assign one stage as your default. So in this case, anytime we send a list through for review, our default stage is review metadata, but you can set it to whatever you want, or you can choose not to have one at all. Yeah, we can see who's requested it. We can see I've now assigned it to myself. Again, we can see the time period this list sits in. We can see where it sits in the hierarchy. So if we wanted to click out on that and see where that sits, which school it's attached to, whatever, we have that information available to us. Moving further down, we have the left-hand side of the screen, and these are all of the items that appear on the reading list that we are currently reviewing. The right-hand side of the screen is contextual information about all of those list items, which will allow you to make a decision about what you need to do about this item. Do I need to check we have enough copies? Do I need to request a digitization? Do I need to update the metadata? Do I just need to check the links working? So what you'll notice is, as I click on different items within the list, that right-hand side of the screen is going to update because it's going to reflect whichever item it is I've got highlighted. We have also released another new feature into this part of the system recently. So the default sorting order of a review is that we will put newly added items at the top of the list. And our thinking there is that, if this list has been reviewed previously and now it's come through because it's been updated, the items that you're probably going to be most interested in paying attention to are the ones that are newly added because you haven't reviewed them before. However, we have had feedback from several institutions over the years. So what you'd really like to be able to do when you're carrying out a review is reflect the item order of the list itself. So we have got this sort by icon up here now. If I choose reading list order, what it's going to do is basically replicate the reading lists. So here are the items exactly as they appear to the student. What I'm going to do though, I'm going to set that back to my default order. You can see that the new items are marked as new. So again, we're immediately trying to draw your attention to those items. Where we have something that appears on a list more than once, we will group it together because we're very aware that, you might want to review them together rather than, sort of saying, okay, we have sufficient stock. And then you work your way down the list and come to the same item when you've already made a decision. So we will group together items where they appear more than once. We have shown you the new item icon here, but one of the other enhancements that we've done over the last few weeks with regards to reviews, we had some feedback from you in our discovery calls that the alerts we were giving you were not granular enough. So there would be some sort of exclamation mark icon highlighting that there's an alert, there is something that you need to pay attention to here. But the feedback you gave us was that that wasn't necessarily always clear enough as to what action was actually required. So with this item I've got here highlighted, you can see directly within this left-hand side, we are showing you all of these different icons because we think there's some action that might be required here. And again, if I go up the list, you can see that there are different items here with different icons, and each time we're giving you a sense of this is the thing you need to pay attention to. This is why we are alerting you, because something has changed since this list was last reviewed. I'm going back to this item because this allows me, I think, to hopefully highlight most of the things that would interest you. So I've highlighted this bookmark on the reading list, and it's showing me a whole load of things about this item that perhaps I need to pay attention to, but we'll come back to those in a moment. So what I've got here, I can see what this item is. I can see the importance that it's been assigned within the reading list. So immediately, if you're thinking about, an acquisitions workflow, that might be relevant to me because it may be that your institution has a policy that we will only buy items if they are marked as essential. Or, we will only buy a maximum of one copy if it's marked as optional or recommended or whatever. Obviously, all of you have got your own individual policies within your library, but the importance is displayed to you. So immediately you've got a sense, okay, what sort of action may I need to take here? There is a new feature which we released recently, which allows you to edit the importance of an item directly from within reviews. Again, that was feedback that we had from institutions. I think the main driver for it was that a lot of you told us that it was very annoying when academics sent lists through for review and they weren't setting importances on individual items. Now, some of you probably know we have some work designed to address that over the next few weeks. But at the moment, if something is set to no importance, then you can come in here, you can edit it directly within the reviews area. I'll come back to digitization in a moment. And then, yeah, what this screen is really designed to do is to give you a sense of exactly what this item is. So we know it's essential. We've got a title. We've got all of the bibliographic metadata here. So if this is something that you decided you needed to place additional orders for, we know exactly what it is we're ordering because we've got the title, we've got the author, we've got the publisher, we've got the ISBN. We also do an edition check in here. So this is the 5th edition of the Study Skills Handbook by Stella Cottrell. We are still using our integration with Nielsen Book Data. And what that is doing is searching for other editions of this title that may have been published. We do know we've had feedback from some of you that you find this of slightly, I don't want to say limited use, but it is a bit of a bugbear with some of you that sometimes it will flag older editions and not just newer ones. That is still something we're looking at, although it's not an easy problem to solve with the feed that we get. But what we have done for now is we've changed the wording here to view other editions. So hopefully that is a little bit less misleading, if you like. But we're still leaving it in there because we know that a lot of you do use it to look for later editions. So we can see what else is out there, which other editions, and whether they're held by the library or not. So in this case, the 5th edition is on the list. It may be that I want to update it to the 6th edition, which the library also holds. We can see which section of the list this appears in. And again, that might be useful for you. a couple of examples I've got from sort of real life. We've had examples of universities where a review has been requested the week before teaching starts, and obviously that doesn't leave you much time to do your resourcing. But I know that a couple of libraries have said, okay, well, what we will do is we will focus on the sections of the list which are being delivered first. We will prioritize those for ordering, and then we will come back and do the rest later. So that will hopefully give you some flexibility as well when making decisions. You can see the student numbers, both for this list and overall. So this particular item, 20 students are registered for the list that this is attached to. This item also appears on an awful lot of other different lists. So if I click on view breakdown here, what it will do, it will show me all the other lists where this item appears and how many students are required for access to each of those different lists. 20 students needing access is very different from 1,391. So that is going to feed into your thinking again when you're placing orders. Well, you know, maybe I've got enough copies for 20 students. However, given that this appears on multiple reading lists, maybe I do need to go away and purchase additional ebooks or print copies or whatever. We surface notes for the library and notes for students within this area. And one of the alerts we've added recently, you can see here, if a library note has changed or a student note has changed since the list was last published, we will surface that here within the reviews interface. Again, that was based on feedback from you guys. You told us that, you know, while the library note was a useful feature to have, sometimes it wasn't clear if a list was 2 or 3 years old, had been reviewed a couple of times. It wasn't clear to the librarian doing the review whether that library note was still relevant. So what we're doing is we're flagging to you, look, the library note has changed since you last reviewed this list, so you probably need to pay attention to it. And again, we're flagging that the student note has changed as well. So what we're doing with all these sort of alerts up here is giving you clues to things that you may need to pay attention to. There's a couple of comments here. The ability to edit importances and also library student notes within reviews is extremely useful. That's good to hear. Are there any changes, edits to a list that will not be picked up, i.e. list name change, change to hierarchy association, change to metadata? Good question, Amjad. So it will not pick up a change to a list name. However, it will still treat it as the same entity, if you like. So if you were just to change the list name, you're not going to see everything marked as new. It's still going to show you sort of alerts based on when the list was previously reviewed. Same goes for the hierarchy association, but I'd be curious to know more about the use case for that, because it is something we could feed back to the product team. There's a question from Evelyn. How does it tell the same book is on multiple lists? Is it via LCN or ISBN? It's on the local control number, Evelyn. So yeah, it's just looking for that item on other lists with the same local control number. Feedback from Liz, it would be good if we could publish a list within the review after editing notes. Liz, I can tell you that is something that's being looked at the moment. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, but yeah, we know. Could library notes be dated by default rather than just an alert? Again, Nick, it's a good question. It is feedback that I can take back to the product team. I can tell you that when library notes have been sort of left or updated, that information is currently available in the all list items report if you export it. But again, it's good feedback that I will take back to the reviews, so to the product team. Okay, what have we covered so far? So we know what the item is, we know where it appears, we know about additions, we know that the note for library and note for students has changed. We can also see how many copies we already have available. So for this particular one, there are 2 copies in this site, there is 1 copy on this site, so these are our print holdings. You have that find other formats editions link that's also available on the list itself. So perhaps you think, well, maybe 4 copies is enough. Maybe we need to check if we've got other editions that would do the job. We can check on that. And that will show us that, sure enough, you do also have an older edition here, and you could check how many copies you had of that as well. So again, that's something you can feed into your acquisitions thinking. Because there is an ISBN here, we also have our integrations with book suppliers. So at this point, if I'm thinking I do need to purchase copies, we have integrations with different book suppliers. So we can see that Gobi are offering this under a one-user license or a paperback copy. We can see that Browns are offering us various pricing options. We can see that eBook Central are offering us an ebook. We also have the integrations here, which aren't as detailed as this. They don't pull through the pricing information, but you can click on check price, and that will take you out to that interface and do an ISBN search, so you can quickly get a sense of how much this would cost. And some of you will know that we've recently launched an Oasis integration, and some of you are in the process of setting that up with us right now. So we've got various, there's a question from Amjad, can Cortex be linked to? Amjad, that's not an integration we have at the moment, but I'm sure it's something we would be interested in exploring. And I think my advice would be to speak to Cortex and tell them that you would like to see it, because it's something we would be open to discussing. So yeah, we have an awful lot of contextual information here about this item, what it is, any guidance from the library, from the academic, and also what they've been telling students to do. We have pricing information. We can see how many copies we already hold, so we can see how many students need access. We can make, at this point, a very considered judgment about what we need to do with this item. Do we need to purchase more copies? Do we need to, are we happy with what we've got? Do we need to take it back to someone and query? So at this point, what we are going to do is we are going to set an outcome. We are going to make a decision about what we need to do about this item. So like the stages, the outcomes are configurable. These are ones that we've set up for our test tenancy. But again, you can configure these for your own language, for your own workflows. You can make them as simple or as complex as you like. In this particular one, I might decide, okay, well, actually, we've got enough copies here. This is fine. So existing stock is sufficient. I can also leave a note here giving some justification for my decision. So perhaps I'll keep it quite simple here. 4 times copies is enough. Because this particular item appears more than once on the list, at this point, I can also say, well, actually, apply my decision to all of these items. So I'm going to tick that box, click on save. And what that's going to do is it's going to save an outcome, which appears in the tab, which we've broken out over here. And so what I can see is who made this decision, what decision they made, when they made it, and any detail they've left. Because obviously some of your items are going to be appearing on lots of lists. And so over time, you're going to build up like an audit trail of who took decisions against this item and when. Again, I can see someone has raised their hand. If you could drop your questions into the chat, we'd be happy to deal with those as we go through. One final thing I will show you while we're sort of very heavily reviewing this individual item. Some of you may have noticed there is now the ability to request a digitization directly from within the reviews area. So again, this is based on feedback that some of you gave us during those discovery calls last year. So if you are using either Talis Aspire copyright clearance or our DCS integration, the request digitization button will now appear for items which are covered by the CLA license. So essentially book material and articles. In this case, I can actually see the academic has been very helpful, and they've told the students chapter 1, pages 9 to 28 will be useful preparation. So that's what they're telling the students to look at. So what I can do is I can request a digitization, and at this point it will just go through your normal workflow. So we know this is chapter 1. This is exactly the same screen they would see as if the academic had requested a digitization directly from the reading list. So it's pages 9 to 28 that I want. So screen 1 here is all of the information about the item being requested. Screen 2 is all of the information about the course that it's required for. And again, we've populated all of this with time period information and hierarchy information. So, we're trying to make this as easy as possible. Click on Submit, and it will go through the usual digitization process. And at this point, okay, you can see what it's done there. It's detected there is a newer edition. I'm going to leave that for now, but obviously I could choose one of those. At this point, it's going to go into your copyright clearance solution and you can process it in the normal way. There's a thing there from Nick. A select all button for the left-hand tick boxes would be lovely. Nick, I think we can help with that, but we'll come back to that in a moment. There is also a question, will the academic who requested the review also receive a notification of the decision regarding, for instance, the acquisition? Ruben, not automatically, but there is something we can do to address that, which I will come to in a few moments. There is also a question from Caroline. It would be useful if I could use the up-down buttons to move through the books in the left side of reviews rather than having to click on the mouse. Sometimes you just need to glance through the list quickly, and the mouse clicks aren't great for the wrist if you are clicking a lot. Okay, Caroline, that's useful feedback. There is something we might be able to sort of show you to address that in a moment. Is it possible to have a filter set to sort the review by date of outcome last set? Simple answer, Harry, at the moment is no, it isn't. I don't recall being asked for that before, although that doesn't mean that it hasn't been. But again, thank you for the feedback. We will share the transcript with the product team after the call. So yeah, that is the core of what you would be doing with a review. You are highlighting the different items within the list. You are checking the metadata that is available to you, and you are making a decision about what needs to be done. Now, obviously, as you can imagine, this screen needs to change slightly as you're going through, because some of these items are books, some of them are web links, some of them are articles. So for instance, that suppliers tab we showed you a moment ago, there's not much point in having a suppliers tab for a YouTube link. It either works or it doesn't. But this screen will change slightly, or the right-hand side will, as we click on, the different items on the left here. So let me show you a couple of other examples of things we can show you. This particular item that I've highlighted now, we're not going to see any sort of print holdings down here. This, I can tell you, is an open access ebook. But we're still going to see things like we can see the importance. We can see, all of the information here. It's a chapter. It's from this book, which is published by OpenStax, and here are the authors. So again, we've got some bibliographic information here. We can still see which lists it appears on. We can see any notes for the library. And again, at this point, you could edit any of these notes if you needed to. In this case, because it's an ebook, we've got a link at the bottom here. And so what we will show you in the review screen is, this is the link that the students will actually be able to see. And you can see we've ticked View Online button. So if you were viewing the list, the View Online button that appears next to this item is following this link. And so if you're doing some link checking, you just need to click on that and just make sure that it's working as expected. And yes, it's taken me in to this item that I wanted to look at. Obviously, some of the items that you have are going to have more than one link in them. So what I've chosen here, this is a journal article, which I've added to this reading list. Again, the metadata is going to change slightly because now we've got a DOI. Now we've got a link resolver check. So if you're linking via open URL, this is where you can check that that's working. But at the bottom of the screen, we are showing you all of the links that are available within this bookmark. So you can see we've captured a web address, we've captured a DOI. We are also providing access to this through your link resolver if you've got one set up. We are showing you with this tick here which one actually forms the View Online button. So when the student looks at the list, obviously they'll see all of these if they expand the item, but the View Online button, the one that you see if you just see the sort of the flat view list, this is what it's pointing at. It's pointing at the web address. If you have any proxy rules set up, and a number of you have this, where you have rules so that please proxy all books if they come from this domain or whatever. Where those proxy rules are in place, we've also put in a link here so that at this point you could click on there and you could check, is this proxy working as expected? Because again, one of the things you told us during discovery calls was it was quite frustrating if you'd captured a link. When the item came through for review, you had the raw link available to you here, but you couldn't see how it was behaving to student users who were following a proxy. So we will show you if a link is proxied or not, and we will apply the proxy when you hover your mouse button over it here as well. What we haven't looked at so far, you can actually edit bookmarks as well. So at this point, if I want to make changes to this, perhaps I'm not happy with some of the metadata, or maybe I would rather it pointed at the DOI instead, you do actually have the possibility to update bookmarks that appear in a reading list. So maybe I want to make changes here, or maybe I would rather, because I think it's more reliable, that this link pointed at the DOI rather than the web address. Click on OK, click on Save. So you can edit things within the list as well. I can see there's a couple more comments in here. Outcomes log is now on a separate tab. Action may be from item on a different list. Would it be better to default to this item? I'm not quite sure I understand the question, Andrew. I mean, yes, the outcomes log is on a different tab, and we've had a couple of bits of feedback on that. We might need to come back to you after the call there. Would also be useful to filter by date outcome last set. Okay. And then I like whether the view online button is ticked or not. It saves me opening the reading list on one screen and the review on the other screen. Angela, that's exactly why we did it. So I'm glad that you've discovered that that's useful for you. So yeah, this is quite dynamic. And just to sort of give you one further example here, this is a YouTube video. As you'd expect, there is less metadata here. But again, you can make changes to it at this point. You could edit the importance. There is less metadata, but I can still see the link down here, and I can still make my changes if necessary. So yeah, what we've sort of covered there is all the information that you can find out about items that appear on lists, all the contextual information you need with regards to importances, sections, student numbers, whether any notes for the library or students have changed, how students can access the item that's available to them, how you can make edits to any of the information here if you're not happy with it, or how you can edit the bookmark itself if you need to. So essentially what you would be doing, Julie says, does reviews make it really clear if a book is not linked to the catalogue? Julie, I will touch on that in just a second, but essentially how we determine whether an item appears in the catalogue or not is whether there is a local control number in the bookmark. Now, obviously, a lot of you have ebooks which you're using, which may not necessarily be catalogued. And we're hoping that a lot of the changes we've made with regards to, applying the proxy and whatever will allow you to check easily whether you do indeed have access to it. But I will touch on that again in a moment. So yeah, we've looked at all of the sort of things. Can you explain the proxied again? Yes, I can. So what you might have, and this is really bespoke for each individual institution, a lot of you have rules in place which basically say, we would like to apply a proxy to specific bookmarks. So let's say, for example, you have access to, I don't know, ABC ebooks. And students gain access to those by applying a proxy. So they need, particular authentication applied at the point they hit the view online button. What we will do is we will set up a rule in the back end of your Talis Aspire setup that says when an item from the ABC ebooks platform is bookmarked and added to a list, automatically apply the institution's proxy so that when a user clicks on the View Online button, the proxy will apply and they will gain access. And yeah, some of you have very complex proxy rules in place within your Talis Aspire setup. Some of you don't use them at all. It really is a very bespoke piece of work for each individual institution based on what authentication you're using and what collections you have access to. But essentially, the proxy, you can see that the link is down here. If we are applying a proxy to users who visit the list, we will allow you to replicate that journey that the student will take. So at this point, they could click on that link and it would follow the proxy and you can see whether or not the link is working. I hope that's clear. If it isn't, do raise a support ticket and there is a support article I can point you towards as well. And if it's something you want to investigate in terms of setting up proxy at your institution, again, raise a support ticket. So yeah, what we are doing is we are setting outcomes against all of the items on the list based on all the criteria that we've sort of looked at here at the moment. Now, it could be quite daunting if, you've got a list, and some of you, who are working with history lecturers will know this all too well. It may be that you have a list which has 300 items on it. And it can be quite daunting, sort of the thought that I need to add an outcome to 300 items which appear on a reading list. That's an awful lot of work. How are we going to do that when we've got so many reviews coming in? So we do also have the filters on the left-hand side of the screen here. And the filters will allow you to quickly drill down to the items on the list that are of particular interest to you. So if this is a list that you've reviewed 2 or 3 times before, and you're fairly confident, that most of the things here don't actually need re-reviewing, perhaps it was only reviewed, the list was only sent for review 2 weeks ago, and there's only a couple of minor changes. You can use the filters here to design a workflow that's going to allow you to work with the reviews area efficiently. So again, let me show you what I mean. Perhaps you have someone that is just, sort of checking the book prices, that is checking, sourcing, where we could get additional copies from, whatever. They're only interested in the books on the list. It's someone else's job to check the links or whatever. You can filter the list so that the review, so that it only shows you the books that appear in the list and nothing else. By the way, some of you might have noticed these are now dynamic. Previously, you had to set one, then you had to sort of save, then you had to move on to the next filter and save. These are now dynamic, so they will update automatically. So let's say I'm only interested in looking at the books that appear in this review, because that's the only things I need to make a decision on. Perhaps my rule within my institution is we only purchase copies if they're marked as essential. So again, I could use this filter. Show me the essential books that appear on this list. These are the things that are of interest to me. And there are a whole load of other filters here to allow you to design a workflow that's going to work for you. If I just reset that a moment, some of you have been asking questions about outcomes in the chat. Perhaps you've picked this review up from someone else, so it's half completed, it's been moved to another stage, now it's come to you. Show me the things where no outcome has yet been defined. So the 2 items where I've already left an outcome aren't going to be shown to me because a decision has been made. Perhaps you put a rule in place and you've communicated with your lecturers, if there are instructions you have for us when publishing a list, please leave a library note. That is what we will use to have this conversation. So filter the list so that it only shows me the items with library notes. And again, it's allowing me to drill down to the items that are of interest to me so that I can quickly isolate the items that I need to pay attention to. There was a question a moment ago about how it determines whether something is in the library catalogue. Just to explain that again, what it's doing is it's looking for a local control number. So you could look for things that are either in the catalogue, i.e. we should already have copies of these, or are not in the catalogue. Bearing in mind the caveats that I've added, you may have ebooks which are not marked as in the catalogue, and we certainly wouldn't expect any articles in here to be showing as in the catalogue unless you're cataloguing them individually, and I don't imagine many of you are. And finally, you can filter on all the new alerts that we've released. So perhaps your interest is just show me the new items. You know, actually, the only things I'm interested in reviewing are things that have been added to this list since it was last reviewed. Or show me all of the items where, what am I choosing here? Where the reading importance has changed since this list item since this list was last reviewed. So maybe last time this was marked as recommended, it's now been marked as essential. Maybe I need to treat it differently as a result of that. Show me all of the items where there is a student note or a library note. Show me all the items with no alerts, you know. So all of the alerts we've put in to be more granular, you can filter on all of those as well. Something else that we've added in recent weeks, again, based on user feedback, you now have the ability to set outcomes in bulk. So for this particular list, I can tell you there are 4 items that appear on this list, which are marked as audio visual. They are all YouTube links. They're all just things that I put on here, you know, to create a list. Maybe I've checked all of the links. They're all fine. What I can do here is I can highlight all 4 of them. And then when I go to set an outcome, you can see it's telling me here, this update will apply to 4 selected items. So again, I might say links checked, all is fine, click on save. I've set 4 outcomes in one go. And you can see those are all now showing as outcome set. There is a question, is there a limit on the number of items that can be ticked to set the outcome to the tick titles? Harry, no, there isn't. There's no limit. So it's as many as you can see. There's another question about the proxy. Can you apply other rules to adding a proxy? Sarah, short answer, yes, but I would advise to raise a ticket with your circumstances and let's have a conversation because it's quite a complex piece of work. And I think we've covered most of what you would need to know about carrying out a review. So we've looked at the information we are providing to you. We've explained why it's changing as we highlight different items. We have shown you how you can drill down the review using the filters to highlight items that are of interest. Another use case that was put to me recently, there are 4 items here where no importance is defined. Maybe you want to zoom into those and quickly set something yourself at this point if you have a thing about, you know, making sure that all importances are set. So that's another thing that you could do. But yeah, we've had a look at the tools you've got here to actually find out about the item and how we can drill down to the items that are quickly of interest. So, you know, with stages and outcomes, you can set your own workflow within here. The final stage of a review, of course, is completing it. So when you've set your outcomes and you've gone away and you've ordered your books and you've checked your links and all the rest of it, the final thing you are going to do is you are going to complete the review. So when we click on complete, you have a final text box here where you can enter some text. And what's going to happen to this text? It is going to go back to the person that originally requested the review. So usually that is going to be the academic that has created the list. And this is your way of, if you like, closing that loop, you know, making sure that, you know, they are aware of any changes that you've made. So it might be that you just say something like, good job, or it might say, you know, we have ordered, I don't know, 3 times research skills book as requested, or we've updated an edition of this particular title, or whatever it is you want to say. This is your chance to have a conversation with the academic to let them know what you have done with their lists as a result of them publishing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on complete. And at that point, we can't do anything more with this list. You know, we've basically marked it as it's closed off and there's only 2 more options up here. Either you can archive the review, which we've already seen how you can do that from the reviews homepage, but you can also do it from here as well. The other thing you can do is export the review, and I'll show you that in a moment. But let me just quickly go to my inbox because I'm hopeful while we've been speaking. Perfect. There we go. That is an example of what the email to the lecturer looks like. And so you can see we've got here, this is an automated message to let you know the library has now completed review of your list. You can see that we have the message that we put in there. So this is, how the academic is updated. And then there's a link in there in the email they receive. So if you have made any changes, they can go back into the list and they can see any changes that you've made. So they can now see how it appears. There was a question earlier about how you can give them an item by item breakdown, or what you've done with instructions on a particular item. So what you can also do with a review is you can export it. Some universities do this, some don't. It's really up to you. But if you export it, what the export will do, in the same way as if you download a report from the main Talis Aspire interface, it will send a link to your inbox. And then when you click on the link, it will download a spreadsheet for you. I've actually prepared one earlier, although I can see from my inbox there that that's come through already. But what you will get is something that looks like this. So it is initially a raw CSV file. I spent about 30 seconds in Excel just tidying this up a little to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And so what you've got here is all of the items that appeared in the list. You can see when they were added. You can see what item type they are. You've got a link to it. You've got a local control number. So a lot of the information you see in the review screen is being replicated in here. But what we've added to this in recent months, as well as the note for student, note for the library, you can now see any review outcomes that were set here. And you can also see any comments that you added if you chose to set an outcome against something. So the question was about, how do you inform the academic? We do know of some institutions who, when a review is complete, will actually export this review and they will send that spreadsheet to the academic, sort of saying, here is a list by list, so an item by item review of what we did with your list. Some academics may not want that. You may consider it overkill. But if you did want to give them that level of detail on the actions you've taken, that's what you can do. We do also know that some libraries, will just export reviews for further analysis, because obviously once you've got this information in the spreadsheet, you can use the tools in Excel or whatever spreadsheet software you're using to do further analysis. So you do have that option to export the review as well. There are more questions coming in. If you decide to replace an item with a different edition, do you just edit the bookmark to make it match the new edition? Evelyn, yes, you do. Will setting an importance within reviews mean the list will need republishing? Peter, yes. At the moment, if you are making changes to a list in a review, you will need to go and republish it when you finish the review. Again, I know it's something that has previously been raised and is something we are aware of. So that's how it is right now, but it doesn't mean it will always be like that. And obviously any changes, we will let you know. Question from Nick, will it be possible to have preset text for the completion box? I don't see why not. Question for the product team, I think. If you'd like to raise that in our ideas forum, I'd be curious to know what sort of support that would attract from other users, but it's a perfectly good question. There is a question about not specifically review, but review adjacent. In the documentation regarding rollover of lists, it states that if the list is in review, it can't be archived. Do they need to be completed review, or can they be archived before I archive the lists? Jill, I'm just trying to get my head around what you're asking there quickly. Essentially, if you're archiving lists when a review is open, the list will not archive. However, you can archive it once the review is complete. I think that's what you meant, but again, do raise a ticket if I've not answered that correctly. If, for example, an academic upgrades a reading to essential, can we bump that item to the top of its section from within reviews, or would you have to go to the list itself? So, Julie, you would have to go to the list itself. That's quite an interesting question. We don't generally get feedback that people would like to start changing the order of things within the list, within reviews. I think that's a new one on me. However, again, if it's something you'd like to raise as an idea, it's certainly something we could look at for the future. Yeah, I'd be curious to know feedback on that one. Another question, with force reviews turned on, does publishing the list request a review each time, or will it only request a review after the first has been completed? So Nick, that's a really good question. With force review, two things to say. It will only generate a review if the request has come from someone with the list publisher role. So in other words, an academic. If you've got librarians going in, making changes to lists and republishing them, it will not force a review each time. However, once it's been published the first time by the academic, if they come in and publish it again and again, it will generate a review each time. Now, I do know we've had a couple of institutions recently tell us that they would like force review to apply for the first time the list is published only, and then they would like to dial it down to one of the other options. I know there is an idea about that currently open in our ideas forum. And if that is something you'd like to support, I'd suggest, yeah, going and adding your vote to it and your suggestions. Okay, and I think we've answered Jill's question there, hopefully. But again, do reach out if that's not the case. Is there any way of exporting a report for a list sent for review, counting the number of items in stock? I'm just thinking on my feet here, Amjad. Exporting a report for a list sent for review, count the number of items in stock. I'm not... Possibly. With that one, I would ask you to raise a support ticket. With some examples, and we'll take a look for you. I don't want to say yes, but I don't entirely want to say no either, because there might be some magic we can do in there. But yeah, raise a ticket and we'll take a look for you. I don't think I had much else material to cover today. So what have we looked at? We've looked at the process of requesting a review and talked about the different options you have about when a review is generated. We have looked at the reviews home screen and how the reviews come into the system and how you can filter on those to particularly highlight filters that are of particular interest to you. We've looked at a review itself, and we have looked at the sort of metadata that is captured for individual list items, how you can make changes to that, how you can be alerted to where things have changed as a way of sort of raising your awareness that, hey, here is something you may need to pay attention to. We have talked about configurations for outcomes and for stages that a review may need to go through. We've looked at how you can drill down using the filters here and how you can sort the list into a way that's, you know, sort of more relevant for you. I don't think we mentioned that you can also search through a particular review. So if you did want to do a search for a particular item because you've got a really long list and you want to pull it up quickly, that's the way you can do it. And we've looked at what happens when you complete a review, in that the alert will go to the academic that's requested it, and you can also export it if you need to do further analysis. Couple more things. One from Evelyn, being able to see the number of print copies when I download data. Okay, again, raise it as an idea. It's an interesting one, and I can certainly see why that would be useful. And there's a final question here from Tim. If an academic sends a list for review and then wants to add more items, is there a way to make it clear they can do this while the review is still open? Okay, Tim, so what I can tell you, and some of you probably know this, if you have a review that is underway and then further updates are made to the list, the review will reflect that when you come back to it. So some of you may have seen a screen that, you know, you've done a little bit of a review, you've gone home for the day, you've come back the next day to carry on work on it. And when you open it, you might see a loading screen saying, you know, we are updating this with 2 items, which means, you know, that someone has made further changes to the list while the review is still open. So we will reflect that. Is there a way to make it clear they can do this? Tim, it doesn't usually stop them. But again, that might be something we could explore with our product team. Maybe some sort of message within the system, you know, you can still continue to edit this while the review is ongoing. It's a good piece of feedback and we'll take it back to the product team. So thank you for that. I can see no further questions. And as I say that, okay, someone clarifying an earlier point about digitization is brilliant. Okay, I can see no further questions. We didn't quite fill the full 90 minutes, but we did take 80, so I think we were justified in extending it a little. Thank you all for your attention and your feedback this afternoon. It has been really useful, and there has been a lot of useful feedback there for me to take back to my colleagues. Hopefully it has all been useful for you, and I'm seeing some thank yous in the webinar chat, so yeah, many thanks for that. If you do have any queries after the session, do raise support tickets, or if there's any features that you think we should be implementing, do raise them in the ideas forum. And yeah, thank you all for your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we will send out the recording in the next couple of days or so. So thank you, everyone.